Coming up on this special edition of Omnivore, how the Maha movement is reshaping the food system, and meet a startup that's making bacon in the lab. Recorded live at the IFT FIRST annual event and expo in Chicago, this is Omnivore, from the editors of Food Technology Magazine and the Institute of Food Technologists.
This episode of Omnivore is brought to you by IFT's Science and Policy Initiatives, your food science advocate, elevating the central role of food science in food and nutrition security, food safety, and sustainable food systems, and championing the adoption of science-based regulations and policies and legislation. Learn more at ift.org/policy-and-advocacy.
Welcome to Omnivore from IFT and Food Technology, where we explore the intersection of business, science, and technology in the global food system. I'm Bill McDowell. A growing wave of regulatory momentum, broadly articulated as MAHA, or Make America Healthy Again, is already reshaping how food companies approach formulation, labeling, and ingredient safety. In this special segment, recorded at the Hot Topic studio stage at IFT FIRST, we're listening in as a standing room only crowd gathered for a community conversation led by Martin Hahn, partner at the law firm Hogan Lovells, Maha Tahiri, CEO and founder of Nutrition Sustainability Strategies, and Kelly Hensel, Deputy Managing Editor of Food Technology, to discuss the Maha agenda and what it could mean for food scientists, product developers, and regulatory teams.
Let's just dive in because we have a lot to cover, obviously. This is a big topic. So I'm going to start with you, Martin. You have years of regulatory experience, and obviously you're helping companies navigate compliance strategy all the time. I'm sure you've heard from a number of your clients about this Maha agenda and how they're going to prepare. So I was hoping you could give us a brief overview of what the Maha agenda is and what makes it so relevant to the food industry right now.
The Maha agenda cannot be summarized briefly, so let's just level set. I think it's very important that we as the food industry acknowledge that we have a public health crisis in this country with people being overweight and with chronic disease. Since I've been practicing and since I graduated from food technology from The Ohio State University in 1986, you have seen the curves, seen how we have increasing rates of obesity and increasing rates of chronic disease. It's not getting better, it's getting worse. So I just want to call out the Maha movement for putting a spotlight on this very important issue. I just wish they did it in a way that was science-based and evidence-based rather than a reactionary base that is all about the soundbite. And that's what we have today. We have a Maha movement that is multifaceted, but they seem to be laser focused on ultra-processed foods. They're disregarding the fact that that dietary advisory committee, that if you look at the members of that committee, at the time, I was having back conversations with my clients and saying, this is the most anti-food industry panel that has ever been convened for the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. Yet even they, with their bias against the food industry, concluded there is no causal link between ultra-processed foods and weight gain. And folks, if you don't have weight gain, you do not have the link to chronic disease. The Maha movement refuses to believe that. They came out with their report. They said ultra-processed foods are one of the primary drivers behind chronic disease. They also are laser focused on certain food ingredients. I think that is a huge mistake. Certified colors are not going to, the removal of certified colors is not going to move the public health needle one iota. But folks, what's going to happen is that a company is going to be able to say, oh, my product no longer has certified colors, so that makes it better for you. And that is ridiculous because the colors are not the issue. They're also laser focused on other ingredients, BHA, BHT, non-nutritive sweetener, seed oils. Seed oils I don't even understand because seed oils, the FDA has qualified health claims saying that seed oils are beneficial for health. Yet for some reason, probably because they're mostly genetically engineered and through the use of pesticides, they're laser focused on seed oils. And so I am concerned with the Maha agenda. It's all about the soundbite. It's all about saying crazy things like petroleum-based dyes. And that's the only time you're ever going to hear me say that word. These are FDA certified colors that have been approved by FDA, found to be safe, and FDA analyzes each batch to ensure that they are safe. So these are safe ingredients. And then I'm going to turn it over to Maha.
I really appreciate that perspective. And I do want to I think there's a number of things that you hit on, Martin, that Maha, I'm hoping you can chime in on. And in fact, like, what is the Maha report not addressing in terms of health and, the nation's chronic disease crisis?
Well, first of all, I want to make a disclaimer. My name is Maha, but I'm not that Maha. This is exactly what is written on my birth certificate. It's not shortened for anything. It is my name. So, and I have 53 years of experience with it. So I have precedent. So I agree with most of what you said. And I usually say that is what Maha says and what Maha does, not me, the one. And there is what Maha covers and what Maha doesn't cover. So Maha says that they are focused on chronic disease and childhood obesity and addressing processed food, etc. But when you look at what they do, what they have done so far, for example, they're allocating $233 million for the whole Maha actions. I mean, for people who work in health and wellness and in nutrition science, this is not even one multi-centric study to really look at chronic disease. This is not covering anything about how we change behavior, looking into account what we heard just like an hour ago from Michael, which is culinary, behavior, tastes, science, regulatory, all together to see how we can actually reshape a food system that is chat, that is, chat was for tasty, healthy, affordable, tasty, and convenient. So that is not covered by Maha. Maha is not covering some of the top issues that actually have science behind them, like sodium, like really like added sugar. So far, they're talking about it. I don't know what they're doing about it. The dietary guidelines. Chris Gardner is here, and really, they document. What they said is that their document is going to be 4 to 5 pages with plain language that Americans can understand. That is not the role of the dietary guideline document. The dietary guideline document is a report that actually goes to the regulator to be translated into regulation and then to go to actually define what are the actions on school meals, etc. It's not communication documents to the public. And so there's frapping hours and hours of work and science and research into 4 or 5 pages. They said that they're going to focus on ultra-processed food. They're going to focus on dyes. They're going to focus on reframing fat. I don't know what that means, reframing fat, but I can tell you that I don't have a client with beef tallow, but they're probably very happy with that. Really thinks that I don't believe that some of them are good, but I don't believe that they are going to change public health. The dyes. Okay. The devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't know. So I'm all in for saying, okay, let's put less chemical when we need less chemicals. Great. What are we replacing them with? I want to see the same level of science on the natural alternatives that we have versus what we are using today. And I'm concerned because there are some solutions that are actually difficult to achieve.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you that. In terms of formulation and how does that affect, are there things that we're overlooking in terms of what the possibilities are what the negative consequences could be for doing these reformulations, especially so quickly, if they really are going to be working towards getting them out of the system by 2026?
I don't think it's so quickly.
Okay.
I was the Chief Health and Wellness Officer for General Mills. That was my last role. And when I was at General Mills, we've been working on actually natural colors for 10 years. The people in this room who are food developers know that. All the companies have been working on that for a long time. They have not implemented it. But think about it from a consumer perspective. What a consumer sees is that these companies decided immediately to change when there's a regulation that came and said, change it. So we have not been proactive enough to do it. And I know it's hard. I was at General Mills when we actually changed the colors of Trix. And I'm not saying anything that is not known. The shares of Trix went 25% less. And this is verbatim from a consumer. Why did you bleach my cereals before putting them in the box? So what this regulation is doing, what this push from RFK Jr. is doing is actually a playing field where actually all the cereals will look like bleached, all the things will look like. So consumers are not going to go to another competitor to buy the product.
And if I could just add onto that, because I think it's very important. It's easy to sit up in your ivory tower and say, let's get sodium benzoate and BHA and BHT out of the food supply. But they actually are there for a very important reason. I may not love the taste of sodium benzoate, but at the same time, if I'm going to have a cold-filled soft drink, I want there to be sodium benzoate in there because if it's not there, it can spoil. And spoilage is a much bigger issue in my view, and having cans explode and having consumers injured because the cans exploded because we don't have sodium benzoate. And so I do think that as food technologists, as product developers, there has been a movement for the last 20 years to what they call clean label. To the extent we can get some of these food ingredients out of the food supply, there's an audience that is there for them, but you have to be smart. And there are certain ingredients that you simply cannot formulate safely today if you don't have a preservative in the system. So we either have to find a different preservative or you have to find a different process. And maybe that means everything has to be thermally processed, which, by the way, rather than cold fill, which, by the way, is probably not environmentally responsible, but we don't care about the environment anymore. So let's just go through these added costs and added expenses when they're unnecessary to do so.
I agree and disagree.
I love disagreement.
So I agree for some forms of sodium that have a functionality that is really linked to food safety. However, there are multiple categories that could lower their sodium. And by the way, a lot of people here in the room decrease sodium in their categories by 20%, 25% in a stealth way with a consistent commitment to doing it by using the genius of some of the people here who put sodium on the surface of a cereal, for example, so that the head of the... So I agree we should not take sodium when it's linked to safety, but I actually think the industry should be continuing their efforts in decreasing sodium.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with you, Maha, because when it comes to sodium reduction,
we cannot rehearse that.
I have been out there on the circuit since FDA came out with their voluntary guidelines in 2016 and said, look, folks, you may not believe this, I may not believe it, but the public health authorities around the world can link sodium intake to increased risk of disease. We need to take this seriously. It's voluntarily being implemented. And I've actually seen a lot of companies and a lot of spaces and a lot of products slowly reduce sodium because, quite frankly, if we're going to reduce sodium, you can't do it right away. And for whatever you do, do not say reduce sodium or low sodium because that's the death knell of the product. But I've actually seen the food industry react responsibly. FDA set targets. We know what they are. We're trying to reach them. Are we all there? No. But we are making progress. I'm also going to put a call out to when the industry knows there's an issue, we reformulate. Back in 1969, Nixon convened the White House Commission on Health, and they recommended that we get saturated fats out of the food supply, and they specifically recommended that we replace them with PHOs. Now, that was a really stupid thing, but the industry responded throughout the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. PHOs were in. Beef tallow, lard, other butter, saturated fat out. Then this crazy thing about trans fat. The data started coming in saying trans fats found in PHOs was actually bad for you. What did the industry do? We moved away from PHOs. We either went to fully hydrogenated oils or we used oils like seed oils, which do not have those level of trans fat. When the industry knows what to do, we respond. So I want to bust this myth that the industry is out there intentionally making people fat and unhappy and that they're making our products addictive, because we're not doing that. We actually have a great story to tell. We don't tell it, and that has to stop.
Can I go a little bit further than that?
Please.
When the industry knows what to do, they do it. I think the industry can be better than that. I think the industry can define the future we want, the future they want, and not be reactive to, okay, take out PHOs, take out dyes, take out whatever. We all could come into an agreement of what future we would like to see in our food system and strive for it and regain the trust of the consumer. You're talking about this reformulation to decrease sodium. I worked in the industry, so I really, really have a lot of empathy for the heroes behind the shadow that are the formulators and the people around here in this place. But I can tell you that the Canadians have done a study that shows that from 2010 to 2020, there is a decrease in sodium and in sugar and in fat. And in 2020, as of 2020, there is an increase. So some companies have put them back. And there is research running right now to show that they're coming back. And I know this is not the R&D community who is driving that change. It's a lot of battle with the C-suite, with the marketing people, with a lot of people who believe that taste is king. And when the times are hard, you need to put taste back into the market. But this is a short-term vision. Because now we are in a situation where, okay, consumers for multiple reasons, GLP-1, the policy, the lack of trust, they are really going after health and wellness, and they really want it. In my 30 years of experience in health and wellness, I've seen high and lows, but I've never seen this high. Yeah. So please be consistent. And as Michael said this morning, go to the sword for those changes and not reversing those changes when they're done.
I think those are all fair points. I do want to get to turn us to what the audience members are wondering. How do they deal with this Maha agenda? How are they dealing with the strategies that are going to come out next month in terms of colors, in terms of ultra processed foods? And Martin, I'm going to ask, I want to ask you specifically, the lawsuits that are already happening in terms of UPFs, obviously the colors are out there. When there's not necessarily laws on the book, how do companies deal with it? What is their strategy?
I find having, severe or having a very large number of martinis every night and severely medicating is one way that helps me cope through the day. My liver is not happy with that, so I'm going to change and follow the dietary guidelines accordingly.
Stop 5 days and then repeat.
So for starters, there are laws. And we have states that's a whole separate issue, but Maha has been very effective at getting states to pass ingredient bans. And so when you are formulating products today, you need to be aware of those states that have banned ingredients. So certified colors being banned in certainly West Virginia, that is meaning we have got to get them out or you're not going to be compliance with those state laws. Also, a lot of school lunches have very restrictive bans in terms of what ingredients. So you need to be aware of what has been banned, and we need to be formulating products today so that they're going to be complying with the future. I also think that you just have to take a deep breath. I know Maha doesn't like seed oils. I'm not advising people to move out of seed oils. But what I am saying is you have an opportunity in product development, come up with a Maha formulated product. Nobody will buy it, but come up with a Maha formulated product that doesn't contain seed oils, that is made with olive oil and other very, very expensive ingredients, all minimally processed, that looks awful, tastes awful, and will not satisfy anybody. But at least you have the ability to say, we're offering these alternative products that are formulated consistent with Maha. And you know what, folks? People don't buy them. it also, that's a defensive strategy, because when you are sued, and we are all going to be sued, I think it's going to be hard to avoid lawsuits if you have the ability to say, well, we actually have, in addition to our regular processed foods, we have this alternative brand of foods that are available that are formulated consistent with the Maha agenda. They don't contain the seed oils. They don't contain the non-nutritive sweeteners. You can just look at the Texas law, the Louisiana laws, the 44 ingredients that are in those laws. Those are the ingredients they're going after. But folks, it doesn't stop there. And so I can't sit here today and tell you what are the ingredients, because that requires me to do a lot of crystal balling. And if I could predict the future, I would not be sitting here. I would be sitting on my own private island somewhere way, 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 way far away from here.
So, if I may, RFK Jr. has been very clear on his views. He has the top 20 foods that he thinks are healthy, and it's public and it's published, and you can find them, and you Google it and find them. So I think the industry should have a combination of being opportunistic and being strategic. There are, as you said, opportunities of reformulating that actually could, how would I say this politically correctly, that would please the administration without compromising the science and without compromising truly who you are. And then there are strategic things that you can do for the future, because if RFK is successful today, it's because he listened to the consumers. So if we listen to our consumers, then deliver to the consumers in a way that is trustworthy, consistent, and we stick with that, we regain the consumer. And then there will not be a Maha that is actually replacing what we should be doing. I'm a strong believer in that.
Although, Maha, I'm going to stick in my lane, but I'm going to actually go out of my lane anyway. I think Maha movement is a very, very small percentage vocal number of consumers. I would say the consumers who choose to buy the product every day, and those higher fat, higher sodium, higher sugar products, which are flying off the shelves, that's what consumers want. Now, if we want to have a nanny state where we have the government telling us what level of sugar and sodium and saturated fat we can have in all products, that's where we're going to, folks. And what I find so funny is that when the Obama administration was in power, Sam Katz, the White House shelf, and Michelle Obama were coming out with recommendations for school nutrition, school guidelines that were actually based on the dietary guidelines. And you know what? Children didn't eat them. We then had a revolt where the American public said, we don't want the nanny state. I think Donald Trump came in and declared ketchup a vegetable for the school lunch program. And so now everything is topsy-turvy in my world. We have a party that usually is industry friendly leaving a movement that, quite frankly, is heading toward the nanny state, where the government's going to be dictating what we can add to the foods, what levels of sodium, what levels of sugar. And RFK has already called sugar a poison. So I guess we have to take all the sugar out of the food supply. That would make him happy, but it's not going to make the American public happy.
Yeah.
I want to tell a story.
One more. We have to wrap it up and move to the community conversation.
I want to tell a story, because when we talk about the consumer, most of the time we're looking at the consumer at a very superficial level, and then we ask them surveys, etc. I love ethnographers. And there's an ethnographer, a friend of mine, who actually shared a story about the diet. He goes to this consumer house doing an ethnography, and this guy tells him, absolutely, I do not take dyes. I don't put this stuff in my body. And he is full of tattoos that are using actually dyes. This is amazing.
Dyes that are not FDA approved and reviewed.
But listen, the insights is that he said, this is a choice I made. Every single tattoo is meaningful to me. But those dyes that are in the food, I didn't choose them. They didn't ask me my opinion. I didn't so this is a very strong insight. This is what the industry should do. It's really go really into the deep. What is the motivation? What are the barriers of people? And when it comes to ultra processed food, they're not all equal. And there are people who are coming with crossing the processing with the nutrient density. Frank, who have done a study from Harvard where he have looked at all processed food, and in the NOVA category 4, he split that in 4A and 4B, where some are really correlated with healthier outcomes and breakfast cereals, yogurts, etc., who have a good nutrient density actually are on the good side. And some are not. Some sweetened beverages, etc. So he's proposing a classification that actually is a matrix and brings the processing and the nutrient density together.
That was Martin Hahn of Hogan Lovells and Maha Tahiri of Nutrition Sustainability Strategies, recorded live at the Hot Topics studio stage at IFT FIRST in Chicago. For more expert insights and post-event coverage, be sure to check out the September issue of Food Technology Magazine at IFT.org. And stay tuned for more live recordings captured at IFT FIRST coming this fall. We'll be back with more Omnivore in a moment. But first, this word from our sponsor.
The future of food is on the line with misleading stories that misrepresent the science of food. IFT's Science and Policy initiatives cut through the noise and make sure the voice of science is heard. To stay up to date on policy and advocacy communications in the media, visit the IFT in the News page at ift.org/press.
Welcome back to Omnivore. I'm Bill McDowell. Whether it's in a BLT or a side dish at a Sunday brunch, U.S. consumers love their bacon. So does the team at San Francisco-based biotech company Mission Barns, which is reimagining how bacon is produced. Earlier this year, the company got approval from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for cell-cultivated pork fat. That made it possible for Mission Barns to introduce a groundbreaking hybrid bacon alternative using its cultivated pork fat and plant protein. Bianca Lê, a cell biologist and head of special projects at Mission Barns, shares the startup story and her hopes for the future of meat with Food Technology's Mary Ellen Kuhn.
Hi, Bianca. You are head of special projects at Mission Barns, which earlier this year became the first company in the world to get U.S. Food and Drug Administration approval for cell-cultivated pork fat. So what is cultivated pork fat and how is it created?
Yeah, cultivated meat is essentially the meat we all know and love, made without the animal. So everyone loves meat. It's the juiciness, the umami. It's very difficult to replace all these sensory and textural properties of meat with plant-based ingredients. And so we want to give consumers that same experience with eating meat without all the negative impacts of conventional animal agriculture. So cultivated meat is essentially more sustainable and healthier for consumers compared to conventional meat. And it essentially works by taking a small sample of meat from an animal. It can be any animal. In our case, we are focused on pork. So we've taken a small sample of meat from a pig without killing the pig. And then we grow that sample of meat in large stainless steel bioreactors, which are essentially, breweries have these tanks to grow yeast cells. We do the same for meat cells. And then after just 2 weeks, we're able to harvest the meat from the bioreactor and produce products like meatballs, bacon, and sausages. And so while we're in San Francisco making meat through cultivation, our donor pig, Dawn, is still alive in a climate sanctuary in upstate New York.
Well, that's great. And that's interesting that it just takes 2 weeks.
Yeah, we've developed our process so that it's very efficient, so much more efficient than growing a whole animal just to eat certain parts of the animal. We've made it so that it's a very short process and uses much less land and water compared to conventional animal agriculture.
Well, tell us a little bit about Mission Barns, how the company got started and how long it's been in existence, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we're based in San Francisco. So our HQ and pilot plant are in the heart of the city. And we were founded in 2018. So our founder, CEO, was previously in another cultivated meat company, but very early on learnt 2 things. One, consumers really care about taste. So our products have to be really delicious. And 2, this technology is quite difficult to scale with existing equipment. And so what we do at Mission Barns is different to other cultivated meat companies in that we just focus on the part of meat that's delicious, which is animal fat. So we just grow pork fat, and then we combine it with majority plant proteins to create products that are both affordable, because you're not producing full cultivated meat products with muscle and fat, so lean and fat. And two, they're really delicious because it has the part of meat that we all crave, the fat.
And it seems as if it's pretty flexible because you have introduced products, a variety of products, meatballs, bacon, and more.
Yeah, so our ingredient is very flexible. We have cultivated pork fat, and we use it just as we would with lard. So we can combine it with plant proteins to make any kind of pork products that you can think of. So yes, we will be launching with meatballs and bacon, but we also have pepperoni, salami, ribs. We have a whole bunch of different pork products in our pipeline.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the formulation. Without revealing anything proprietary, what can you tell us about that?
The formulation of our final products?
Yes.
Sure, yeah. So we have various mission fat systems. So that's our cultivated pork fat cells combined with plant ingredients. And these different systems are used for different products. So bacon fat, for example, needs to render and retain crispiness, whereas meatball fat needs to be juicy and needs to slowly melt within the meatball. Salami fat, because it's a cured deli meat, needs to maintain its solid texture at room temperature. So all of these different fat applications have different properties, and that's why we're able to build a portfolio of lots of different pork products.
And could we talk a little bit about the nutritional profile of these products with the fact that they're hybrid, the plant-based plus the cultivated fat?
Yeah, absolutely. So the benefit of cultivated meat is that we can really fine-tune and control the nutritional and sensory profile of our products. So if you look at our fatty acid profile composition, for example, it matches conventional pork. But I think that's just the start of the innovation. I think we can not only be identical to pork, I think we should be even healthier. And so we can actually control the amount of saturated fats, the amount of cholesterol, all these micro and macronutrients that consumers care about. We're able to reduce the cholesterol in our products and have zero trans fats in our products. So I think there's a lot of innovation there that is one key advantage of our innovation.
Well, absolutely. Very innovative. I'm wondering, could you quantify that at all? How much the saturated fat, for example, might be reduced?
Yeah, it really depends on our products. So our bacon has the most fat, which is probably not surprising. I don't have the exact numbers right now, but yeah, it really varies depending on the application and how fatty we actually want our products to be.
Well, and Mission Barns is certainly on the cutting edge, being the first to get this USDA approval. Let's talk about that a little bit and consumers, like consumers' response to cultivated meat. Has Mission Barns looked into this, how consumers feel about cultivated meat, and if they, in fact, even understand what it is?
Yeah, absolutely. So awareness of cultivated meat is still fairly low. Everyone is familiar with plant-based meat. They've tried Impossible, Beyond, all those other large brands. But what we've found in the very early days is consumers are excited. They want alternatives. But once they try it once, they won't repurchase it. And the number one reason isn't because of health or price, it's because of taste. These plant-based products often don't compare sensorially to conventional. And so we were very clear from day one that taste needed to be the number one thing that we focus on. And so we find that, we've done hundreds of tastings at our test kitchen here at our HQ, and we find that tasting really is believing. I think consumers are initially a bit skeptical or they're a bit concerned about this new novel process. But once they take that first bite of meatball, it's actually quite underwhelming because it tastes exactly like conventional meat. So I think that's really a really cool moment to be able to witness time and time again that our products are just like conventional meat without all of the additional baggage of animal agriculture.
So I guess that makes you pretty optimistic about the future of the so-called alt meats.
Optimistic, but definitely realistic as well. We know there's a long road ahead of us, and the success of the industry is not inevitable. There needs to be a lot of players in the ecosystem working together, and we also need governments and academia to also get on board so that we can roll out the products and ensure consumer success.
Well, maybe elaborate on that a little bit and kind of get into what are some of the biggest challenges to succeeding in this space in the market.
Yeah, so Mission Barns has historically focused on, I'd say, two major things. One is developing the core technology, so our core cultivation platform that allows us to produce our cultivated meat in a very sustainable and efficient way. And two would be the regulatory environment. So yes, we became the first and only company in the world to receive cultivated pork approval. That took about 3.5 years. I think the regulation needs to catch up so that other companies don't spend that much time on getting their products approved for safety. But I think the next challenge is scaling our production system. And so we need a lot of we need space, we need the equipment, we need other companies in other parts of the supply chain to get on board and actually help us scale our production so that we are able to meet consumer demand for meat, which is actually growing.
Yes, and in fact, from what I understand, sales of conventional meat are strong right now.
Absolutely, yeah. Consumers love meat, and it's not surprising. And as global population increases, I don't think that's going to slow down anytime soon. What will change, though, is the price of conventional meat. I think it's going to be more and more difficult to grow meat the way we want to. High welfare standards, using pasture-raised animals. I think that's going to be more and more difficult as climate change worsens. So I've always said, I think animal agriculture is not just a contributor to climate change, but actually a key victim of climate change. And so I think prices for animal products, meat, dairy, eggs, is only going to increase as our natural resources are depleted. So I think there is definitely a huge market opportunity for these alternatives like cultivated meat.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I had never heard that particular description of animal agriculture also being a victim of climate change.
Yep.
And you were talking about the scaling up. So as I understand it, in making these products, like scaling it up is difficult because it's expensive. Is that some of the challenge?
Absolutely, yes. And we knew about this challenge early on, which is why we actually decided to design our own bioreactor that can address this scaling issue. So we have a novel proprietary bioreactor that has a patent. It's very different to existing bioreactors out there for example, microbial fermentation. And so this design allows us to grow meat cells the way they would naturally grow in the animal's body. And we've projected the future commercial scales of our production and have shown that we can reach price parity within the coming years.
That's great. And what's the status of the Mission Barns products right now? Are they actually commercialized and out in the marketplace?
Yeah, so we are working with our both retail and restaurant partners to sell our products in the Bay Area. So we are working with Sprouts Farmers Market, which is a national retail chain, and we'll be selling our meatballs there very soon. And Fiorella is a Bay Area restaurant group that focuses on seasonal Italian cuisine, and we'll have both our bacon and meatballs there. So you can check us out on our website at missionbarns.com, all our socials to find out when we'll be launching.
Let's talk a little bit about you too and your path to Mission Barns, because you founded a nonprofit in Australia that's dedicated to promoting the cellular agriculture sector. So it sounds like working in this area is something that you've been passionate about. What triggered your interest?
Yeah, so I actually came from a biomedical research career, focusing on cell research and how can we understand how cells grow for human health purposes. And, I was always in the medical space. So learning about this new technology and understanding that, hey, my expertise and these decades worth of research can actually also be applied to food to solve climate change, human health, and animal welfare. To me, it was a no-brainer to really support this field. And I founded the nonprofit so that we could fund academic research for cultivated meat. And so I was there for about 2.5 years, grew the organization, and they're still running, still operating and doing well. But I decided that, moving into the commercial side and in industry was a way to really spearhead industry in a way that, it was really compelling to move to Mission Barns because I think what they're doing, it was just very different to a lot of the other companies' approach.
So Mission Barns and its mission
Yes.
prompted your decision to move from Australia to San Francisco?
Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right.
Well, before we wrap up, what's next for Mission Barns?
Yeah, so I think our product launches are going to be super exciting for us, but also scaling to the next facility. I think, we're looking at a demonstration scale facility so that we can prove out our novel bioreactor at the pre-commercial scale. So right now we're in the pilot scale, then we'll be looking at demonstration scale, and then after that will be our full-blown commercial scale facility. So we're at a really exciting time of strong growth, and I think pork fat is just the beginning. There will be plenty of other opportunities for our technology in the coming years.
How long will it take until you get to that commercial scale? Do you have a timetable target for that?
Yeah, I would say in the next few years. I can't give an exact timeline because it's quite dependent on investment and our fundraising. So yeah, you stay tuned.
Well, absolutely. Thanks for your time today, and congratulations for moving this far along the path with cultivated meat.
Bianca Lê is a cell biologist and tech strategist at Mission Barns, a San Francisco-based biotech startup that has successfully cultivated and commercialized cell-based animal fat. Learn more about the current state of cultivated meat and the role it's expected to play in the broader meat sector in the August cover story of Food Technology magazine.
Our thanks to IFT's Science and Policy Initiative, your food science advocate driving increased funding for food, agriculture, and nutrition research, and increased representation of food science professionals in critical forums. Join the fight to keep science front and center in food by becoming an IFT member or renew your membership today. Learn more at ift.org/membership.
And that wraps up this episode of Omnivore. Thanks again to all our guests and my colleagues at Food Technology. Omnivore is produced and distributed by the Institute of Food Technologists. If you enjoyed today's show and want to learn more about Food Technology magazine or how to join the conversation by becoming an IFT member, visit ift.org/membership. For more in-depth discussion about innovation in the science of food, check out IFT's other podcast, Side Dish, on the News and Publications page of ift.org. If you have comments or suggestions for future shows, just send us an email. The address is editors@ift.org. For the entire team at Food Technology and IFT, I'm Bill McDowell. Thanks for listening, and join us again for our next episode.